Hey guys, what's up? Pete Servold here, author of Paleo Eats, Real Food, Real Simple, also founder of Pete's Paleo. Thanks so much everybody out there for joining us today on another Facebook Live video. Very excited about today. We're going to be discussing bone broth, stock, bone broth, call it what you will. I'm going to be talking about where it came from, why we use it, and also how to make it. And then once you've made it, kind of the different things that you can do with it. We're going to go ahead and give everyone just a few seconds. Make sure, can you hear me out there? Would love to know where everyone's from. Go ahead and comment. Let us know where you're watching us from. And as always, if you have any questions, go ahead and feel free to put them in the comments section while we're doing the video, and we will answer them at the end. So if you can hear me out there, let us know, and then we'll go ahead and get started in just a second. All right, awesome. Okay, so bone broth. It's a really hot topic, hot subject now. You're hearing all about it. There's a chef in New York that started almost like a coffee stand, but he just sells bone broth. It's unbelievably nutritious, and it's also one of the oldest foods that humans have ever eaten. Bone broth is about taking bones and getting everything that they have to offer out of them. And it was one of the first ways that we were able to eat food was, to get the bones that were left over from all the scavengers and the predators hunting. We went and got the bones and we broke them up and we ate the marrow and then we stewed the bones, and all that nutrition is how we, started to survive at the very beginning. And now it's something that we're coming back to, which is really what primal and paleo and that whole food movement's about. As a chef, it was something that I was introduced to, had nothing to do with nutrition. When chefs think about stock, every time in a home kitchen when you use water, chefs use stock. The reason being is that stock has body. It makes the soup stand up and taste silky. It gives the sauce a nice beautiful shine. And that is the main reason why we used it in restaurants is that body and mouthfeel that kind of gives that bear hug to your tongue. That really is the difference between when you go and eat at home and when you go to a restaurant. Now, come to find out later on into the paleo world and learning about all of the nutrition behind the food that we eat, bone broth and bone stock, the reason why it has that mouthfeel and has all that delicious flavor and flavor enhancing qualities is because of all the nutrients and gelatin and collagen that you get from making bone broth. So what we're going to do today is we're going to make a beef bone broth. This is 2 pounds of femur bones cut up. Now you can make an unroasted or a roasted stock. The unroasted stock is going to have all the nutritional components, whereas if you roast these bones at 375 for about 45 minutes, you're going to enhance the richness and flavor of your bone broth, but you're going to lose a little bit of the nutritional quality. So it's kind of, depending on your usage. If you're going to use it to braise a brisket, I might say roast the bones for about 45 minutes at 350 degrees. If you're making something for nourishment and something to have on hand when you're not feeling so good, or as a base for a soup where you don't want the flavor of the broth to be too strong, that's when you're going to go ahead and just make a raw beef broth. So what you do here is I have 2 pounds of beef bones and a big stock pot, soup pot. A lot of times, one of the first questions people ask is, well, how much bone to water, what's the ratio? And essentially you want a pound and a half of bones for every gallon of broth that you're gonna make. Now you can reduce that gallon down, but that's, so that you get something that's heartier or something that's easier to use and smaller and easier to store. But about a pound and a half of bones to every gallon of broth is what you're looking for. I have a little bit of a different trick where I take the container. This is the container that I use for my bone broth. This is what we store it in our house, and this is what fits in our freezer. I fill the water up to the brim with this container, and then I know that I have enough room for the stock when it's left over. The water always starts off nice and cold. Go ahead and throw the bones into the pot. Gonna gently pour the water in here. I can't stress enough how important it is to start with cold bones, cold water. You want to use a very low heat for almost the entire time, but especially in the beginning. The reason why is there is a lot of blood, and there's just a lot of coagulants, and just not the best stuff that's going to make your broth taste good and going to make it nice and pretty if you're using it for culinary purposes. So you start with cold water and cold bones and slowly bring it up. And over that first hour, what you'll have is things kind of settle at the top, all the blood and kind of icky bits. And you're going to use a ladle, which you'll have on hand, and just skim off the top with the ladle. And then just have something, like a container that you can dump that into. And beef broth ideally is going to go from 6 to 8 hours. So this is something that you can do overnight. It's something that you can do all day. I highly, highly recommend the first time that you do this, though, you absolutely do it during the day and when you're home all day. The reason being is you'd be surprised how fast things reduce, and you do not want to accidentally start a fire or just burn all of your bones. And so you want to make sure that you realize what low, setting is on your stove is actually low, and you're not going to end up burning the house down to make some good bone broth. Definitely not worth it there. As far as vegetables that we're going to add, I am a big proponent of just carrots and onions. A lot of people, even in culinary school, we learned always add celery as part of the trinity of carrots and onions. I find that for broth making, since you're going to be cooking it for such a long time, that you get a bitter quality from celery, which is just a bummer, and I'm not a big fan of it. So I just use carrots and onions. Now the cool thing is you do not need to peel or just wash it off, get all the dirt off, but you don't need to peel the carrots, and you don't even need to really do anything with the peel of the onion other than take the bottom and the top off. So I just take the back ends of the carrots off, nice big hunks. Remember, this is going to be cooking for 6 hours, so there's no need to, we're not working on our knife skills when we're making bone broth. Same with the onion, just bottom, top, split it. You can quarter it if you want, but you literally don't do any more than that. You can leave the, man down. Anyways, after that, for your basic bone broth, this is all that you're going to add. I've got a couple bay leaves. You can throw some parsley stems, but that's it. No salts, no pepper, no garlic, no ginger, none of that. Any of those things, like garlic, ginger, turmeric, any of that stuff that you would add anyways, the flavor is going to be killed if you cook it for that long, 1. 2, you're making a huge batch of this. You're going to end up with a gallon or a gallon and a half of broth. From there, you've got a nice base. If I want to use some of it to braise brisket, I can add garlic and rosemary to that. If I want to use the rest as my morning kind of pre-coffee or after coffee drink, then that's where I can add in some really nice flavors and make the most out of all the different things that you can make out of bone broth. But if you start from the very beginning, putting salt and garlic and things like that, it's going to get pretty salty towards the end because you are going to end up reducing it over time. 2, now the rest of your batch tastes like garlic. And if you don't want garlic in a dish, or you have someone over that isn't prone to having garlic, you're stuck. You're stuck with a stock or a broth that has garlic in it already. So always just super simple on the base. So now we've got this on a low heat. It's going to slowly come up. You're going to pull off some of the skin that comes to the top over the first hour. After that, you are done. You leave that on low. Make sure it never comes to a boil. You always want to just have a nice rolling simmer. Never let it get to a boil. And in 8 hours, you will have some beautiful beef broth. This is beef, and this is chicken. Now I want to show you, there's a really big difference between these two, and there's a reason why. So when you make beef, you're going to use either femur or knuckle bones. Now there's a good amount of cartilage, but it's not an insane amount of cartilage if you're in collagen. If you're looking for a ton of collagen, what you really want to make is chicken broth. You can see that's almost like Jell-O in and of itself. The reason why is when you make chicken broth, you're going to be using the entire carcass, the feet, the backs, and just think about how you're built. there's much more cartilage in your spine and in your neck and the rest of your body than there is in just your legs. So with the beef, when you end up with just using like the femurs and the knuckles, you're not going to get a ton of collagen. It's still super gloopy and very, very good for you. But if you want a super thick gelatinous stock, chicken's kind of the way to go. So it just really depends on what you're looking for. I wanted to show you just what it looks like once it comes out. So again, this is beef broth. It was cooked for 8 hours. Nice, thick, really, really pretty stock. So tonight, what I'm gonna do after we're done shooting is I have a brisket in the fridge. I'm going to sear it, salt and pepper it, throw it into a different pan, put it in the oven at 250 degrees, and in the morning when we wake up, we will have perfect pull apart brisket that we can fold into some scrambled eggs, we can toss on a salad for lunch, or we can warm up at night for dinner and have with some potatoes and carrots and all the fixings that you would have with brisket. But let's talk about what people really want to know what to do with bone broth now, which is I'm supposed to drink it, right? You're supposed to drink it. It makes you feel good. It's good. If you're an athlete, it's good for recovery. If you're sick, it helps you feel better. And the reason why is because it's full of all those micronutrients and minerals and collagen and all the good stuff that we pulled out of those bones by cooking it for 8 hours in water and steeping it. At my house, we're a really big fan of turmeric and ginger. If you can, do the fresh stuff. It's gonna taste way better and obviously have much more nutrients in it. Full disclosure, if you are cutting turmeric and working with it, I would highly recommend, unless you've got some super strong soap, to use some gloves, because you'll typically find that the turmeric will stay with you for a couple days on your fingers. And never use it on a cutting board that you really, really don't want to stain orange, because it will stain it orange. Ginger and turmeric both peel the same way. A lot of times people, when they peel turmeric or they peel ginger, they will use a peeler. But the thing is the peeler will take 1/8 of an inch off every time you do it. If you do that the whole way around, you're gonna end up with just this tiny little thing in the center. But if you take a spoon and just pull the spoon towards you, you take off much less, you just get just the skin. So you end up saving so much. Oh, that smells so, so good. So fresh, so good for you. I'm gonna take, basically 1 inch, so half a tablespoon of this, chop it up, throw it in the bone broth, do the same thing for the ginger. I'll show you guys how for the ginger, the same trick works, where you're just peeling everything off. And from there you can just chop up a fresh knob of ginger and a fresh knob of turmeric. You can either warm it up in a pot or you can microwave it if you're in a hurry. All of that's fine. We always give it a pinch of salt. That kind of helps bring out the flavor. But especially in the morning, ginger and turmeric are the way to go. Now, if you're not feeling very good, some ginger and garlic. So do the same amount of ginger and do a couple cloves of garlic. Steep the broth for about 10 minutes until it's had some time to soak up all the flavors, and it's going to be really, really good for you. So that's kind of the two main ways that we like to kind of the savory and the sweet, even though turmeric is more like just fresh and refreshing and super, super good for you. That's the one, one or two of the ways that we like to drink it in our house. As far as cooking with broth, it is really, when you make soups, it's going to make everything richer. It's going to pull out all the flavors. It's going to wrap your mouth in a bear hug. And it's also going to be way, way, way more nutritious for you than cooking with water. And especially the store-bought, broth, the Swanson's type stuff. Sorry, Swanson. They're not cooking with bones. They're not steeping it for hours. They're not getting all the collagen out. It's just a much, just not nearly as nutritious as a product. And one last thing I want to mention about making the broth, strainer. So you want to have a strainer on hand, so when you do make the leap from the pot to your storage container, you're going to grab all the bits of carrot and onions and beef bones out of there. And the finer the strainer that you have, the better off you are. There's going to be a lot of, bits and pieces of the bone that are going to break down. You want to pull the nutrition out of there, which you've done with the 8-hour cooking time, but you don't want to actually taste that or eat it or try to, digest it. So make sure that when you do pour the broth out and into the container that you have a strainer ready for you. After that, let it sit at room temperature so that it settles down. You never want to put something that's boiling hot into the fridge. You'll actually steam everything in the fridge. You'll be calling the maintenance guy for your fridge very fast if you make a habit of doing that. So let this sit out for 30 to 45 minutes so that it can come down, so it's not steaming, bubbling hot. And then you can throw it into the fridge. It'll get nice and gelatinous like this. And then from there, it'll last for a week in your fridge or up to 3 months in the freezer. 3 to 6 months, but I always err on the side of caution and say 3 months. You want to avoid the freezer burn and kind of losing the flavor and things like that. So there you go, guys. That is my presentation on how to make some really nutritious, delicious bone broth. Are there any questions out there? Okay.
So Regina has a question of, do you separate off the fat before you put the bones in?
You can, but I like to kind of leave it in, and you'll find the stuff that will come to the top first is going to be like the blood and bits like that. And then when you let the broth settle, when you let it cool, like I was saying, the fat will float to the top, and in the refrigerator, it'll form a fat cap. You can pull that fat off, and just like we have our stored, this is our bacon fat, our lard that we keep right next to the stove, you can take that fat, and so with beef, now you have beef tallow. And you can cook with that. It's another cooking fat that you can use. And I hate to just discard it in the broth making process because you paid for it and it's so good. Imagine having a beef brisket and then taking the Hakurei turnips and some carrots and onions, and instead of cooking it in ghee or olive oil, cooking it in the beef tallow that you braise the beef brisket in. That's the type of stuff that, one, makes your food unbelievably more nutritious. You're layering the flavors. 2, you're using every bit of the animal that was harvested for you to eat. And 3, that's just old school fine dining technique. That's, when you order a pork dish, we're going to cook with the pork fat, we're going to make with a pork stock, and everything is going to be trying to wrap everything in the flavor of the dish that you're eating and just make it that much more unctuous and tasty and juicy. So don't worry about separating the fat. Just strain the whole broth, fat included. When it cools down, the fat cap will come to the top. You can pull that off and you can save that and cook with it.
What about a slow cooker?
You can absolutely do a bone broth in slow cookers. They're way better as far as not having to worry about whether or not you're going to burn the house down or things like that. They will take a little longer though. I would always say what you can do in 8 hours on the stove, I would try to do in 12 hours in a slow cooker. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate everyone coming out and hanging out with us and watching our next video. Recipes like this are all found in Paleo Eats, Real Food, Real Simple, which I am the author of, and you can get right now for just the cost of shipping. You can see the link in the comments below. There's some awesome recipes in here: pulled pork, bacon bars, and actually a lot of these recipes is what I use to lose 60 pounds on my journey to not being a fat chef anymore. So again, thank you all so much for checking us out. Go ahead and make that bone broth. You can do it. Don't be scared. Thanks again for your time. Y'all have a great night.